What's up YouTube, this is MathWiz97 and I am back with another one of these WWE 2K18 pre-release discussion videos. And today, I know that last time I said I was going to wait until the whole roster reveal was done and then I would make a discussion about it if I was going to cover it at all. And I do have a lot to say about this roster reveal. Some of it's good, some of it's bad, but I've got stuff to say and I waited, the reveal is over. Now technically there's still DLC that is going to be announced, but honestly, no matter what the DLC is, it's not going to change my opinion. At least, as far as like, no, it really won't change my opinions. It might strengthen some of what I'm about to say here, but no matter what the DLC being announced is, it's not going to change my overall thoughts on how this roster reveal played out and how excited or not excited I might be for the future of WWE 2K18 on this channel, or just the video game as a whole. Now, I'm a bad news first, good news second type of guy, so before I actually get into this, I just want to clarify that what I'm about to say is very opinionated, doesn't even really matter in the grand scheme of things. I'm just one guy. You can disagree with my opinion if you want. Honestly, I mean, the game developers, they don't care about what I, one person, have to say, and my claims are very much so specific to me and the type of content that, basically the type of content that I make. So what I'm about to say regarding two superstars in particular with this roster reveal that, well, they were excluded from the game. I'm talking about, of course, Wesley Blake and Buddy Murphy. By far, the worst part of the roster reveal is the fact that they were not included in this game. Now, I know that a lot of people are going to disagree with me on this. They're going to say, well, Blake and Murphy are, yeah, they're not even active on the roster, really. They don't do much on NXT, and now I can't really defend much of that, in that I haven't been watching NXT since, I stopped watching NXT back in April, so I can't confirm whether or not they have been on NXT tapings, they've been on NXT TV, but I know that they've been going around on live events, Buddy Murphy especially. You know, he's got the whole best kept secret gimmick thing. I don't know exactly what they're doing with that, but all I know is that Blake and Murphy, they're still with the company. I checked WWE.com the day before this last bit of the roster was revealed, and they were listed on the NXT page. They are still on the NXT roster. They're still signed with the company, so it baffles me that they weren't included when their models are already in the game and they're still with the company, but they're getting cut from the game. When we still have guys like Earthquake and Typhoon. Those are just two I'm thinking of off the top of my head, but there could be more irrelevant. Now, I don't want to disrespect legends and their accomplishments for the business, but realistically, most of the people who are going to be playing these games in modern times, like, especially if you're targeting a young audience, who knows Earthquake and Typhoon? Who knows who the natural disasters are? Now, this isn't to say that you should just take legends out completely, but just some of the legends that are in the game don't really, I think, serve much of a purpose. Like, it was different when you had showcases and whatnot when you'd bring them in, but like, whoever played as Colonel Mustafa beyond the showcase mode? You raise your hands down in the comment section. How many of you actually were excited to play as Colonel Mustafa? Now, I know he's not in the game anymore. They finally cut him out, but still, guys like Earthquake and Typhoon, these are just, again, I'm picking two random names. These are just the ones that are popping up in my head. But, you know, legends like that who you could say, well, I mean, they're not even like in the company, or I don't know. There are a lot of just legends who I guess aren't even in the games, but personally, I've always been focused on the in-game, or not the in-game, but the current day superstars. I don't care what legends are in the game. They could be someone famous like Eddie Guerrero or Kurt Angle, and I don't really care much in the big picture. And I know that's not going to be the same for everybody. A lot of people are excited to play as Kurt Angle in the new game. A lot of people were excited when Eddie Guerrero was announced as DLC for 2K17. And I understand that opinion. I understand why you'd be excited to create some of these fantasy matchups. Like with a guy like Eddie Guerrero, you could create fantasy matchups as if, you know, what if Eddie never died? What if he was still around and he was there when guys like John Cena and Randy Orton were coming up, taking over the company? And, you know, when they were in their heyday, when you had like 2009, 2008-ish, where Orton and Cena had this like massive rivalry? What if Eddie Guerrero was around in that time frame? You know, that's what you can do with a video game, and that's why legends are important, is that you can create these fantasy matchups that would never happen in real life. You can get matchups like Sting versus The Undertaker, John Cena versus The Undertaker. I did that in my universe mode. I had a rivalry between John Cena and The Undertaker. That's not something that ever happened in real life. It's only possible in the game. But there are just certain legends that don't have the same kind of star power as the other ones do. And I'm not saying that they should be excluded, but I'm gonna say their shelf life in the game, like, ultimately, even when they are relevant in a mode like Showcase mode, I really don't care. I'm not gonna go out of my way to play as even the more famous ones, like Stone Cold Steve Austin. I'm not gonna go out of my way to play a match as him. And this is why I say everything I'm gonna say in this video is very specific to me, at least this first part. But then you have guys like Blake and Murphy who are still with the company. They're still under contract and their models are already in the game, but they're being cut because they haven't been on NXT TV, apparently. The claim seems to be that they haven't been on it in the last year, and I know that's false. I know for a fact that that is false, that at least within the past year they have made some appearances, maybe not in the last 6 months necessarily. I feel like Murphy might have shown up once, but they're not big NXT names. So I could understand why some people wouldn't really care that Blake and Murphy were cut from the game. Now this is more so a problem that I just have with making my universe mode on a year, like updating it with each game, is that every time the game flips over, I'm gonna be losing some superstars. So, and they'll come out of nowhere, like Ryback. Like, okay, the difference before, when Ryback was cut from the game, I knew that was coming because he was released. I just might not have expected it to happen so quickly. But then you have someone like Batista who just randomly disappeared, one of these legends who just kind of randomly left the game for seemingly no apparent reason. I'm sure that there's some sort of like legal deal there, or maybe he only had so many years, like a 1-year deal with 2K or whatever, or, well, I guess he was there for 3 years, so maybe like a 3-year thing, but because that would explain, I think, guys like the Dudley Boys who, I mean, they retired, so I was kind of expecting the Dudley Boys to still be in the game. But at the same time, they're not exactly out of the wrestling world. They are still doing stuff. At least as far as I'm aware, they're still doing stuff in the wrestling world, just not with the WWE. So I could understand from like that perspective if the Dudley Boys were taken out. Although with someone like the New Age Outlaws, that's a bit confusing why they were brought back for a single game and then removed. Like with the Dudley Boys, they're still kind of active, so I could understand if they were removed for business reasons or whatnot. Because ultimately, I believe at the end of the day, most, if not all of the, no, I won't say all of them, because you do have guys who have no contact with WWE getting brought in by 2K. This is how we got guys like Goldberg as a pre-order bonus. How we got the Ultimate Warrior. People are getting brought back into the WWE through the video games, through 2K. And I think that's really cool, especially for a guy like the Ultimate Warrior who was only around for so long until he eventually passed away. But it's a good way to kind of bring back those legends, make those connections. And I do like that aspect of including legends, that you can bring in these big names and potentially build some bridges there. But ultimately, I prefer the current day superstars, regardless of what their role is on, like, in the WWE. Because you say, well, Blake and Murphy haven't been on NXT TV for 6 months or so. How about a guy like Tyson Kidd, who has been out of action for over a year? And I'm not saying that I want Tyson Kidd to be removed from the game, mind you, but if a guy like Tyson Kidd, who hasn't even been in the ring for over a year with this injury, if he can still make the cut, why are Blake and Murphy being removed? Like, they're in the same boat as Tyson Kidd. Their models are still in the game. They're still a part of the company. So what's with this double standard? Why are they being cut? I can understand guys like, I know people are probably going to be upset that Austin Aries is no longer in the game. But to be fair, Austin Aries was recently released, so it's expected that he would cut ties with the company, he would cut ties with 2K as well, that WWE would want him pulled from the game. And that's the same with guys like Alberto Del Rio, Simon Gotch, Stardust, guys who were released. Oh, Jack Swagger as well, can't forget Jack Swagger. Guys who are released, it makes sense that they would be removed from the game. But when it comes to removing superstars from the in-game roster, my thought is that if you're gonna remove someone from the game, it shouldn't be noticeable, or it shouldn't be, like, save the releases, which are kind of obvious that that's gonna happen, and some people are gonna miss them, like Austin Aries. I was really excited to use him more in universe mode, but with him not being in the game, I'm a little less motivated to do so. But I can understand from that perspective, like, someone gets released, they're gonna be cut from the game. You would expect that. It makes sense from a business standpoint. But when you have Blake and Murphy, who haven't been released, who are still with the company, I know I saw an argument somewhere that, well, they have new gimmicks now, so 2K would have to go through the process of updating their stuff, their graphics, their attires. But even then, you don't even have to do that, because if you want to play the argument that they haven't been on TV for so long, why feel the need then to update their gimmicks? Like, if they haven't been on TV to showcase them, then why would you feel the need to do that? You could just bring in the models you had before, maybe change up the attires if you wanted to, but you didn't even really have to do that. You could just change up the colors if that's all you wanted to do. If you wanted to put in the bare minimum to keep these guys in the game, and you never know, maybe they get revealed as DLC, but at that point, that's stupid, because they were in the past 2 games. Like, I could potentially see if they did an NXT pack, just throwing Buddy Murphy in there. You know, maybe they throw in Blake as well, but I'd say more so Murphy, because he seems to have more of a following. He seems to be a bit more popular than Wesley Blake. But throw him in there as, like, the best kept secret, and just sneak him into that DLC pack, as that way it's a little way to keep him in the game, and put, I guess, a little less effort into the DLC, because they're going to be focusing on getting guys like the Hardy Boys, I'd imagine, or even if they don't go for the Hardy Boys, if that's a little too late, maybe focusing, if you want to talk about NXT guys, focusing on maybe an Aleister Black, what's the name? Frickin' the El Idolo, I can't remember his name, but that guy, La Sombra, I don't remember his frickin' NXT handle, jeez, but yeah, that guy, they could be working on him, you know, these other guys, and then they might just sneak Murphy in there, and I wouldn't necessarily say that's, I mean, like, he was in the game last year, throwing those 2 in as DLC at the last minute wouldn't make any sense to me. I wouldn't be happy with it, so that's why I say, even if they are revealed as DLC, I'm still not pleased, because they were already in the game. Just give them to me, have a smaller DLC pack. If people are that interested in those guys specifically, like an Aleister Black, or frickin' the face is in my mind, but I can't remember his name. But if people are that interested in those guys, they'll buy the DLC. You know it'll happen. But that's my rant on Blake and Murphy out of the way. I'm very disappointed that they're not in the game, and I hate that I have to take the time to harp on that, because I'm excited with this roster overall. There's a lot of new additions. I took the liberty of making a list of all the new additions and all the people who are cut from the roster, and out of all the roster cuts, you have Alberto Del Rio, Austin Aries, Arn Anderson, Blake and Murphy, Bobby Heenan, Brian Pillman, the Dudley Boys, Eva Marie, Hunter Hearst Helmsley, the retro version of Triple H, Jack Swagger, New Age Outlaws, Mr. McMahon, Papa Shango, Simon Guy Stardust, Ted DiBiase. Of all those names listed, the only ones I'm actually somewhat upset with is Blake and Murphy, and I just made the whole rant about that. I mean, the New Age Outlaws, that's a bit of a bummer, because I was kind of hoping to use them potentially in universe mode, or even just play a couple matches with them, because I never really did that in 2K17, but 2K18 might have given me the opportunity, do something a bit different with the tag team division, but hey, guess what? New Age Outlaws are immediately pulled from the game. That's a bit disheartening, but it might have just been a 1-year deal with 2K, and in that case, I would understand why they were pulled from the game. Blake and Murphy really are the only ones I'm upset about. Like, I could say I'm upset about Jack Swagger, because he was one of my Universe Mode originals, but he was released from the company. I understand that. And most of these other, most of the names I just listed there, I didn't even realize were, if I hadn't made that list, I wouldn't have immediately realized that they weren't in the game. That's how I feel the roster cuts should be, besides releases, because you'll notice the releases. But a guy like Papa Shango, I never played as Papa Shango. I don't care about Papa Shango in the video game. He gets cut, I don't even notice. Brian Pillman, I didn't play as him, he gets cut, that's fine by me. That's how I feel most of the roster cuts should be, unless they are releases, or something like the Dudley Boys where they're retired, and maybe they have, you know, their deal expires, they have some other, they're doing something else somewhere that WWE wouldn't want to draw attention to them. So like when Stardust was still in the game, that was a bit of a surprise. But like nowadays, you're not going to keep Cody Rhodes in the game when he's off in Ring of Honor or New Japan doing his run of the Indies circuit. You're not gonna want to draw attention to that, at least from WWE's perspective, and I can understand why they would do that. But let's focus on the new additions, because we have a lot of new additions to this game. The Authors of Pain, including freaking Paul Ellering, so that's 3 right off the bat. You have Akira Tozawa, you have the Animal Batista, you have Billy Kay, Bobby Roode, Cedric Alexander, Kurt Hawkins, both members of DIY, that's Johnny Gargano and Tommaso Ciampa. You have Ember Moon, Gran Metalik, Jack Gallagher, Jinder Mahal, Cassius Ohno, Kurt Angle, Maurice, Mickie James, Noam Dar, No Way Jose, Peyton Royce. My girl Peyton Royce is in the game and I am hyped. Rhino, Rich Swann, Roderick Strong, Sanity, 4 members of Sanity, and I guess you could consider it 5 if you count Sawyer Fulton. I'm actually kind of surprised that Sawyer Fulton is even in the game because he ended up getting injured, so maybe they were just working on him before the injury, and then they just went through with it anyway. But I still think it's cool to have Sawyer Fulton in the game. You could put up an interesting rivalry there, and who knows, whenever Sawyer Fulton returns from his injury, maybe he'll end up going up against Sanity. So that way you're kind of, in a way, planning ahead a little bit. So if you want to have Sanity be this ultra powerful stable, give them 5 guys, you can do that. Or you can have Sawyer Fulton show up and go against Sanity, which might happen in NXT. Who knows exactly what they're going to do with him. And then you have TM61, that's another 2 superstars. The Brian Kendrick, TJ Perkins, my boy TJ Perkins, TJP is in the game, and Rick Martel, who I honestly couldn't care less about. I think he was DLC. No, he wasn't DLC. Apparently his data was in 2K18, and now he's officially in the game. I don't really care. That's why he wasn't listed alphabetically. That's why I saved him for the end of the list. But looking at all of these names, you have the introduction of the Cruiserweight Division, which I expected to happen. If it didn't happen, I would have been very disappointed. Although, I'm still a little upset because where is the premier athlete? What the heck's his name? Yeah, that guy. And sleeper hold guy from the Cruiserweight Classic. He's from Pennsylvania. He's my boy, but I forget his name. Frickin' guys. Yeah, but those guys aren't in the game. Tony Nese was one of them. And what's the other guy? I don't remember his name, but they're not in the game, which is kind of disappointing. Even if they're just jobbers, you would think that they'd be in the game. Like, they were a pretty key part of the Cruiserweight division, from what I understand, when it first appeared on the main roster. Like, they were kind of the not the faceless jobbers, but like they were the guys who would always show up, and you knew who they were. You knew who Tony Nese and oh my god, he was one of my favorites from the Classic, and I can't even remember his name. But yeah, those guys were there, not in the game, which is kind of disappointing. But I'm not gonna harp too badly over that when we have so many new additions, and especially the women's division. This is what I was really hoping for in the new game, was that the women's division would get another big overhaul. Because yeah, we now have the 4 horsewomen. We have, at the time, basically everyone who was in NXT was put in the game. And then NXT had to completely redevelop their women's division. So I was hoping that we would get all these new additions in there, just because the landscape of NXT has completely shifted in the time since last year's game. And we got most of them. We got most of the relevant ones. We didn't get Liv Morgan, which I was kind of hoping she'd be in there as well, just to add another name to the list, because you can never have too many women, honestly. Like, that's been my biggest struggle with the women's division, is that, yeah, you have all these new faces thrown in at once, but even then, it's still a little small. You could still expand on it when NXT has so many other names. And they've done that. 2K has brought in, you bring back the legends like Mickie James. Actually, she's the only new legend on this list. But then there's also Maurice, who returned. Apparently, she's going to be not just a manager, she's going to be an active wrestler in the game, which is cool. I don't know I don't know how invested I'd be in Maryse, considering I don't think she wrestles anymore, but still, it's another name, another face to throw into the mix, and that's what we need. And we only really lost Eva Marie. She was the only one who was cut from the game, and I mean, I'm not broken up about that. I never cared for Eva Marie, ever. Not in the video game, not in the actual company. I mean, in NXT, she helped bring up Nia Jax, so I can give her credit for that. She was a good heel in NXT, but yeah, her getting cut, not too big of a loss. And we bring in all these new talent. We bring in a legend like Mickie James, a returning Maryse, and then we have all the NXT women. We have Billie Kay, we have Ember Moon, we have Peyton Royce. That's only 3 new women being brought in if you don't count Maryse and Mickie James. But still, that's a pretty solid lineup. You got them. Oh, and Nikki Cross, I forgot. I have her listed here under Sanity, so her name is not actually in my list. But Nikki Cross is in there as well. So you've got the big names from NXT. You've got the big women in there. So even if Liv Morgan isn't quite in there, you don't have Aaliyah, who I don't think have had big roles in NXT, but I remember right before I stopped watching, Liv Morgan had kind of been doing some stuff with Billie and Peyton, and she's one of NXT's homegrown talent, so I would have hoped that she could represent in this game, but no Liv Morgan, so that's a bit disheartening, but I can live with it. She's not one of NXT's big draws. And someone like Ruby Riott, she came in kind of late, so I can understand her not making the cut, but I'm really digging that aspect of it, that we have all these new women. We have a majority of the cruiserweights, all the relevant ones that you'd think of. And I don't, like, at least when I think of the Cruiserweight Classic, obviously we're not going to have your Kota Ibushi's, your Zack Sabre Jr.'s, because they're not actually with the company. And we don't have a lot of the non-focal cruiserweights in there. Like, you don't see the Ho-Ho Loon, he's not in there. You really don't see any of the, like a Tony Nese, the ones who don't get a big focus, you don't see them in there, which I suppose I can live with. That's understandable. You want to bring in so many superstars as you can, and considering we have so many, I'm not going to nitpick over that aspect of it a whole lot. But then we've also got a returning legend like Rhino. Kurt Angle's in there as well. But then we get into the actual, like, the big NXT names, and this is what gets me really excited, is that you're getting the Authors of Pain. They're former NXT Tag Team Champions now, because I think they just lost them. But then you've got all the cruiserweights I mentioned: Akira Tozawa, Cedric Alexander, the fan favorite. You got Kurt Hawkins, who is on the roster, so I can understand why he's in the game. You've got DIY, they're in there, and I know everybody's been waiting for DIY. You got Grand Metalik, who was one of the most impressive cruiserweights in the Cruiserweight Classic. He came up second only to my boy TJ Perkins, and I really hate how WWE has made TJ Perkins irrelevant, but yeah, TJ Perkins, he's in the game, and I'm super excited to have TJ Perkins in the game. He's I'd say one of the superstars I'm most excited to play as in WWE 2K18, because yeah, some of his moves were in 2K17, some of his more notable moves, like the TJP clutch, and that pop-up drop kick, and his head scissor dab thing. So those are there, but now we can get more of an expanded look at his arsenal, and that excites me. Rich Swann, my second favorite from the Cruiserweight Classic. He's in the game, and we get to, hopefully we're going to get a lot of his high-flying moves, like that vertical 450 splash, however the heck he does that, defies gravity, but he's in the game. Sanity, another powerful name. Jack Gallagher, he's just another key thing in there. Jinder Mahal, the WWE champion, Jinder Mahal. Never imagined that I'd ever say that, but yeah, he's got a big presence in the main roster now, so he's in there. I'm sure someone will be excited that Jinder Mahal's in the game. But then you get the really big names like Bobby Roode. I don't really care for Bobby Roode all that much personally, but he's one of NXT's biggest draws, so it makes sense that he'd be in the game, and I'm excited to have him in there for no other reason than just his entrance alone. Chris Hero, Cassius Ohno is in the game. Like, just imagine, I can only imagine how, like, the fans of the indie darlings would feel about, like, seeing, well, Indie Darlings, I guess, technically refers to the wrestlers themselves rather than the fans, but I'm sure the fans, like, imagine how hyped, like, longtime fans of Chris Hero would be to finally see Chris Hero in a WWE video game. It's crazy. Unfortunately, I dropped out of NXT just before, like, I stopped watching it around the time that Chris Hero showed up, or, like, right before he showed up. So I don't know a whole lot about him beyond just segments talking about him, but he'll be another interesting character to have in the game. No Way Jose, people might not be as excited for him because he's not one of NXT's standouts, but he's one of NXT's homegrown talent, and I'm glad that, see, that's the thing with NXT bringing in a lot of newer, like, or not newer stars, but bringing in a lot of pre-established names. A lot of the more homegrown talent are getting lost in the shuffle, unless you're in the tag team division, because that's where someone like the Authors of Pain could come up and thrive. But if you're a single superstar, good luck. You mostly get overlooked. But No Way Jose, kind of the next, maybe not quite to the same level as Ty Dillinger, because Ty Dillinger was there before all the new faces, before all the veterans from other companies, the Indie Darlings, came in. Ty Dillinger was already there. No Way Jose was one of the first guys to kind of start coming up while all these Indie Darlings were taking over NXT. So I'm still glad that he's not getting neglected. Like, you might be kind of upset that maybe No Way Jose is getting in the game, as opposed to the guy I mentioned earlier, whose name I can't remember, La Sombra. I know that was his indie name, or not indie name, but, you know, non-WWE name. I can't remember his frickin' name. And then you've got Roderick Strong, who I'm sure is going to be another huge name for a lot of people. I know my boy Murph's YT13 is going to be hyped about Roderick Strong being in the game. But overall, there's a lot of good new additions, and for the most part, all the new additions that are being brought into the game are newer talent. Like, other than Rick Martel, Kurt Angle, Batista, and then, like, Mickie James is on the roster, so I think she is excusable. But other than, there's really only 3 or 4 legend tier people or veterans who are just being introduced into the game. For the most part, these are all NXT superstars, Cruiserweight Classic guys who recently came back to the WWE and are on their main roster payroll now. So there's a lot of new faces, a lot of current faces being introduced into the game. And for the most part, the guys who were cut are legends, like Arn Anderson, Albert, Bobby Heenan, Brian Pillman. These guys are all veterans. They're not on the current day roster. I mean, I guess Albert, you could say he's in because he's, you know, Matt Bloom is the trainer in NXT, but you get my point. They're not really on the main roster. They're like not currently active competing. And I think that's good. And I think it's another step in the right direction for these games to continue to focus more on the modern day talent and make that the focus of your new, focus on bringing in those newer guys into your video game rather than focusing on, like, WWE 2K18 and I think even WWE 13. Those games were really absurd in that half the roster was Attitude Era guys, legends from 30 years of WrestleMania. That was kind of ridiculous because at the end of the day, the roster, like the main roster, the current day guys, that was a pretty small selection, not a lot to choose from because half of the game is being taken up by the legends. But nowadays, we're getting away from that. And this game continues to take that step in the right direction. So I'm really excited for what the implications of this could be. I'm really excited to play as many of the superstars involved. Just a little upset. I'm a little nitpicky that Blake and Murphy were cut from the game, but you know, you live with it. I can always get a created wrestler if I really need to, which, you know, in this instance, I might, maybe, because I've done a lot with Blake and Murphy in the 2 years they were in the video game, so maybe I won't quite let them slip away yet, but that's for me to decide and not spoil. So, thank you for joining me for another discussion video. I think I might do one more of these before the game comes out, like maybe a week or two right before release. I might make kind of like a final thoughts pre-release video discussion, so if you want to see that, let me know. because otherwise I don't think there's any other big announcements that would be worthy of covering, in my opinion. When you have all these other channels that make constant news videos and they cover like every little detail that gets dropped, there's really no point in someone like me, other than for views, to make a video like that and just repeat what a lot of people will already say and perhaps even say better. So that's why I prefer to just lump it all together in one discussion. That way the people who want to know what I have to say can hear what I have to say, and otherwise I'm not really wasting much of your time beyond that with just repeated information. But anyways, thank you as always for joining me for this discussion, and until next time, keep on YouTubing.